My boy believed I hadn't caught him adding something odd to my wine at the Christmas meal, but I spotted every little thing. As he stepped away, I swapped our drinks, transforming his treachery into his own snare. The outcome for him afterward stunned me. Before we go on, kindly subscribe to the channel and drop a comment with the current time and your location. The doorbell chimed not just once, but in quick, insistent spurts that pierced the calm of my living room in the evening. I put aside my newspaper and checked the clock. 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Who drops by at this time? I pulled open the door to see Seal on my porch. His shoulders slumped against the chill of December. Leona was right behind him, arms folded, her breath forming tiny clouds. Before I could utter a word, my son shoved past me into the house. "We have to discuss something." His tone had a sharpness I hadn't heard since his teen years. Leona came in after, shutting the door with a solid snap. She scanned my living room as if evaluating it, her eyes pausing on the custom shelves I'd built by hand, the wooden floors I'd installed plank by plank. "Seal, what's going on?" I retreated toward my armchair, abruptly feeling out of place in my own space. He strode back and forth by the hearth, his office attire creased, his typically tidy hair tousled. "It's about this place, Dad. About you holding on to a fortune while we're scraping by." The statement struck me like a slap. "Scraping by? But you've got a solid job, a decent home." "Decent home." Leona advanced, her words cutting. "Lyman, we're squeezed into a 2-bedroom flat with 2 kids on the rise. Madison's bunking in the living area, for goodness sake." Seal spun around, his cheeks red. "Dad, we require a larger home immediately. Not when you're gone. The children are developing, and we can't hold out for an inheritance while you stockpile riches." I clutched the back of my seat. This house embodied 40 years of my existence. Every fastener, every strip of molding, every precisely aligned connection, all my labor. "Seal's son, this house is my creation, my recollections. Once I'm no longer here, it'll belong to you. All of it will." "That's not sufficient." His voice broke with urgency. "We need the funds right away. Sell it, Dad, relocate to a senior living spot. Use the value to support your kin." Leona drew nearer, her voice shifting to a soft, coaxing one. "Lyman, think logically. We need the cash now. The kids require room to thrive, chances we can't offer. Barely making ends meet." "Logically?" Anger surged in my torso. "Logically?" I constructed this with my bare hands over 4 decades. Every plank, every space. "This is my life's achievement." Seal's expression twisted in irritation. "Your life's achievement means nothing if it doesn't aid your family. You're acting selfishly, Dad, utterly selfish." The charge hurt deeply. I toiled on building sites through scorching summers and freezing winters. Pinched every cent. Erected this home as a heritage for him. Now he labeled me selfish for desiring to reside in it. "Leave." The command emerged softly, but it held the force of my determination. "Both of you leave my home." Seal's eyes expanded, then narrowed. "All right, but this isn't finished, Dad. We'll discover another approach." They departed without further comment. The front door banged shut, shaking the framed images on the walls. Through the glass, I observed their vehicle drive off, rear lights fading into the December gloom. I remained solitary in my living room, my legs quivering, my heart thumping against my chest. The well-known walls appeared altered now, not comforting like home, but as if under assault. 90 minutes on, I hadn't budged from the spot where Seal had left me. The quiet weighed on my ears, interrupted only by the structure creaking around me. My plaid shirt stuck to my skin, moist with chilled perspiration. I lowered myself into my armchair, the hide groaning beneath me. My fingers refused to steady. In all my time, I'd never pictured my own child addressing me like that, gazing at me with such disdain. The living room seemed transformed. I gazed at the decorative trim I'd shaped and placed myself, at the polished wooden floors I'd smoothed. Each area contained echoes of roughened palms and sore muscles, of Martha fetching me coffee amid weekend tasks. I rose and approached the hearth, tracing my fingers over the shelf I'd sculpted from one solid oak piece. I recall blending concrete in the cold. I murmured to the vacant space, placing each stone as the mixture kept solidifying. Our marriage picture rested in its usual spot, Martha beaming in her sunny gown. I lifted the silver holder, her image blurring as tears welled in my eyes. Martha would have figured out the right path. She always did. I proceeded to her preferred seat by the window and settled in, still grasping the photo. Martha had a talent for peering beyond folks' fury to their true wants. "Family before everything, Lyman." She'd say, "When a person strikes out, they're often scared. Perhaps Seal was scared. Maybe Leona as well. Existing in a tight flat with two youngsters, seeing their peers acquire bigger homes while they fought, that sort of strain could drive people to extremes. The idea propelled me upstairs to our former bedroom. In the wardrobe behind Martha's dangling outfits that I couldn't part with, I accessed the small wall safe. The steel panel opened with a gentle snap. $10,000 in tidy stacks, funds I'd accumulated over the years, setting aside 20 here, 50 there. Each bill stood for something I skipped, some indulgence I forwent, a fresh vehicle when the old one still functioned. Eating out when simple sandwiches sufficed. I hoisted the cash, sensing its heft. $10,000 wasn't the property value Seal sought, but it was genuine assistance. It could handle an initial payment. Provide them a new beginning. It was affection in concrete shape. The notes felt fresh against my skin as I tallied them once more. Come morning, I'd contact Seal. I'd express regret for my outburst and present him this offering. Perhaps then he'd grasp that I wasn't his foe. I was his dad, attempting to aid in the sole manner I understood. I placed the money back in the safe, but kept it unlatched. Tomorrow would usher in mending. Tomorrow my son would recall that family was paramount. The following morning I positioned myself at my kitchen table with hot coffee and the prior day's paper neatly folded nearby. Sunbeams poured through the frost-rimmed pane, creating well-known designs over the oak top I'd constructed and fitted myself 2 decades back. I'd practiced the phrases numerous times during breakfast prep. Straightforward, sincere, affectionate, an apology and a proposal enveloped in the aspiration of repair. My hands quivered a bit as I punched in Seal's number. The line rang twice before his voice sliced through, abrupt and annoyed. "What is it, Dad?" Not a friendly hello, but I continued. "Son, I wish to assist. I've reflected on yesterday and you're correct. Family ought to be priority. I possess $10,000 in cash. It's for you." Quiet lingered between us. Then Seal's voice erupted from the device so loudly I pulled it from my ear. "10,000? Are you serious? Is this a prank?" I blinked, baffled by his outrage. "It's all the spare funds I have, son. I figured it might aid with an initial deposit." "An initial deposit?" His chuckle was harsh, biting. "Dad, do you realize housing prices? We can't manage a proper deposit with that measly sum." My coffee chilled as I clutched the phone firmer. "Seal, please. It's all I've stashed away." "It's given with care." His tone fractured with fury. "You stingy old fool. You lounge on hundreds of thousands in property value, tossing us crumbs like paupers. This is offensive." Anger ignited in my core. I labored 40 years to erect this home. Every cent of that cash stemmed from extra hours and missed dinners. And what benefit does it bring us trapped in your cherished house? We're suffering, Dad. My children are maturing in a squeezed flat while you amass fortune like a miserly beast. Amass? I was yelling now, upright at my kitchen surface. I extended to you all I possess. All you possess is this house. Sell it, Dad. Cease the selfishness and aid your living relatives rather than grasping at remembrances of a departed wife. The phrase struck like a punch. Martha. He dragged Martha into it, brushing off her legacy as if she were insignificant, as if our 40-year union was merely a barrier to his windfall. Face facts, old-timer. You'll perish in that place by yourself, and we'll dispose of it regardless. Why not assist us now when it's crucial? The connection ended. I stood gripping the handset, hearing the tone hum in my ear. My hand trembled as I placed it down. The kitchen appeared tinier. Abruptly, the walls closing in. Outside, a neighbor's holiday lights twinkled merrily, jeering at the shadow that had enveloped my day. The coffee had turned icy. I gazed at it, absorbing what had transpired. My son, the lad I'd instructed in wielding a mallet who'd assisted me in laying bathroom tiles at 12, had just exposed his real self. He didn't desire my support. He craved my home, and he was prepared to ruin our bond to obtain it. An hour post-call, I remained in my kitchen seat, eyeing the phone as if it could chime anew. The coffee had become utterly cold, a skim developing atop. My hands had at last ceased trembling. I rose from the table and ambled gradually into the living room. My limbs felt wobbly, as though I'd been ill for weeks. The morning rays angled through the panes I'd set myself, illuminating specks of dust swirling in the atmosphere. On the shelf rested a framed shot of Seal at 8, beaming with a missing tooth grin. He'd been aiding me with the kitchen units that weekend, passing screws and steadying planks. Such tiny hands back then, keen to assist his father in crafting something enduring. I took the frame, sliding my thumb over the glass. 35 years prior, he'd fractured his arm tumbling from his bicycle. I'd cradled him in this exact chair while Martha phoned the physician, sensing his little frame quiver with sobs against me. Where had that child vanished? University fees, $42,000. I'd pulled double shifts for 3 years to settle it. His initial vehicle upon graduation, $8,000. The nuptials Leona demanded, $15,000 beyond what Martha and I had expended on our whole first marital year. And this morning he dubbed me a stingy old man. I replaced the photo, my jaw tightening. The recollection surged, unsolicited and piercing. Instructing him to operate a car in the vacant church lot, aiding his move to his debut apartment, endorsing the loan for his next vehicle when his credit fell short. Every concession, every additional shift, every trip Martha and I skipped to bolster our son's life. And for what? So he could position himself in my living room and insist I vend the home I'd assembled manually. I strode to the window, peering at my front lawn. Mrs. Peterson opposite was already stringing holiday lights, humming while she labored. Ordinary folks engaging in ordinary activities, not enduring their spirits torn by thankless offspring. The wrath felt pure, crisp, and keen, slicing through the pain like a knife. I squared my shoulders, sensing something firm and conclusive take root in my chest. I'd nurtured Seal, backed him, cherished him without conditions for 42 years, and he'd hurled it back for cash. Branded me greedy for wishing to dwell in the home I'd devoted decades to. That's enough, no more. I surveyed my living room afresh, not as a prospective bequest to be split, but as my domain, the decorative molding I'd sliced manually, the wooden floors I'd refined, the integrated racks where Martha's volumes still resided precisely as she'd positioned them. This belonged to me, and if Seal desired no part of me unless I was delivering funds, then he could receive precisely that. Zilch. My torso felt less burdened than throughout the morning. The choice rested comfortably in my gut, firm and certain. No further calls, no more efforts to assist, no more letdown when my son displayed his true colors. I glanced at the garage where containers of holiday ornaments awaited. Perhaps some manual labor would dispel this agitated vigor. Tomorrow I'd haul out the lights and adorn the place festively. Not for kin. I lacked that anymore. But for myself, because I was able, because it was my home. The next day I stirred before sunrise and couldn't drift off again. By 9 I'd completed breakfast and was in my garage, retrieving dusty cartons from the racks. Christmas decor, 1995. In Martha's precise script on the closest one. Maybe adorning the house will lift my spirits. The notion rang empty even as I conceived it. But I required an activity for my hands, something unrelated to pondering ungrateful sons or harsh remarks. The initial box held icicle light strands knotted into messes that would demand an hour to unravel. I laid them over my work table, systematically inspecting each bulb for breaks or scorched parts. The routine task felt healing, an issue I could truly resolve. By 10:30 I fetched my metal ladder from its mounts and set it against the structure. At 65, ascending to affix lights along the eaves demanded more exertion than before. My joints complained with every rung, and I halted twice to regain my wind, but the bodily strain felt authentic, substantial. Each fastener I secured to the eave. Each light segment I verified and draped marked real advancement. Unlike striving to sustain a connection with someone who viewed me solely as a cash source. Mrs. Peterson signaled from her yard while I arranged the glowing deer on my grass. Starting early this season, Lyman. I forced a grin and returned the gesture. At least my neighbors didn't demand I sell my place and shift to a senior's facility. The phone began chiming at 2:30. I was sorting the final light strand when Cecil's tone pierced the December breeze. The same tune he'd used for ages, some lively melody I'd never troubled to identify. I allowed it to ring till it ceased. 10 minutes later it sounded again. I clenched my jaw and persisted with my work. The bush lights needed checking before connection. Half the line was out, likely from garage storage all year. I'd need to rummage for replacement bulbs. Third chime at 2:45. I acted as if I didn't notice, but my hands began quivering once more. What if an issue with the grandchildren? Tommy had been battling a chill last week. What if Madison had an accident at school? Martha's voice whispered in my memory. Family first, Lyman, always family first. But Martha had never heard her son call her husband a greedy old man. The fourth ring came at 2:50. I stopped working entirely, standing in my front yard with Christmas lights draped over my arm like tinsel. My chest felt tight. torn between righteous anger and grandfather's worry. What if something happened to Tommy or the little one? Martha would never forgive me if I ignored a call about the grandkids. Neither would I. I walked slowly toward the front door, each step feeling heavier than the last. The phone had stopped ringing, but I knew it would start again. Seal was persistent when he wanted something. Sure enough, as I reached for the door handle, it rang again. I stood on my own doorstep, breathing hard from more than just the physical work. My hand hovered over the knob. I could let it ring. Let voicemail handle whatever Cecil had to say this time. Continue my peaceful morning of decorating and pretend I didn't have a son. But what if it really was about the kids? The ringing seemed louder inside the house. I walked to the kitchen and stared at the phone for 3 more rings before picking it up. "What do you want, Cecil?" "Dad, forgive me." Seal's voice came through the receiver, soft and humble. Nothing like yesterday's venom. I behaved like an idiot. Leona made my call to apologize. I shifted the phone to my other ear, suspicious. The complete change in his tone set off alarms in my head. Yesterday, he'd called me a greedy old man. Today, he sounded like a repentant child. "I don't know, son. You hurt me very badly. I know, I was awful to you. Completely awful." His voice cracked slightly, but something about it felt rehearsed. Thestress of the holidays. The kids asking for things we can't afford. None of that excuses how I spoke to you. I leaned against my kitchen counter, still wearing my work clothes from decorating. Through the window, I could see the half-finished light display on my front lawn. The mundane sight somehow grounded me. Stress doesn't turn you into a different person, Seal. It just shows who you really are. Please don't say that. Now he sounded genuinely distressed. "Dad, I need you to know how sorry I am. That's why I'm calling. Leon and I talked all night and we want you to come to Christmas dinner." Christmas dinner. I rubbed my forehead with my free hand, feeling the tension that had settled there like a permanent resident. "Christmas Eve, $6, Cecile continued. "Please come, Dad. The kids want to see Grandpa. Madison keeps asking when you're coming over. She's been practicing a song on her recorder to play for you." The mention of Madison hit me square in the chest. 7 years old and gap-toothed like her father had been, always eager to show me her latest artwork or the new dance she'd learned at school. "Seal, I just don't. Tommy's been asking about you, too. He wants to show you his science project. Something about volcanoes." Seal's voice grew warmer, more natural. "They miss you, Dad. We all miss you." I found myself thinking about Christmas Eve's past. Martha would spend all day in the kitchen, making her famous Christmas pudding from her grandmother's recipe. The house would smell like cinnamon and nutmeg. We'd drive to Seal's place with a car full of presents and homemade desserts. "I could bring Christmas pudding," I heard myself say. Martha's recipe. That would be perfect. Cecil's relief was palpable. The kids would love that. They always talk about Grandma Martha's cooking. I grabbed a pen and notepad from the counter. "What's your address again?" When Seal rattled it off, I wrote it down carefully. "And it's 6 o'clock on Christmas Eve. 6 sharp. Dad, thank you. This means everything, Toos." "Fine." I stared at the address I'd written, second-guessing myself even as I spoke. "But this is your last chance, Seal. I won't be treated like that again. I understand. I promise things will be different." After I hung up, I stood in my kitchen holding the piece of paper with Seal's address. The numbers looked stark against the white notepad. A destination I wasn't sure I should be traveling to. Maybe people could change. Maybe stress really had made him say things he didn't mean. Maybe his apology was genuine and Christmas Eve could be a fresh start for our relationship. Or maybe I was just a foolish old man who wanted to believe his son still loved him. I folded the paper and slipped it into my shirt pocket right next to my heart, where it felt like both a promise and a warning. Saturday morning, December 21st, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at Seal's address on the notepad. Maybe I was too harsh. Boys sometimes say stupid things under pressure. Martha always believed people deserved second chances, especially family. The shopping center was packed with last-minute Christmas shoppers. I circled the parking lot 3 times before finding a spot near the back. Inside the toy store, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I wandered the aisles, overwhelmed by the choices. For Tommy, I selected a Lego architecture set, the kind that would challenge a 10-year-old's mind. He'd always been clever with his hands, just like his grandfather. For Madison, an art supply set with colored pencils, watercolors, and a thick sketch pad. She'd shown me her drawings last summer, detailed pictures of flowers and houses. The cashier, a college-aged girl with tired eyes, smiled as she rang up the purchases. "Your grandchildren are lucky to have someone who cares so much about getting the right gifts." Pride swelled in my chest. They're good kids. Sunday and Monday were for the pudding. I retrieved Martha's handwritten recipe from the kitchen drawer where it had sat untouched for 3 years. Her careful cursive instructed day 1 for mixing, day 2 for steaming, day 3 for serving. At the grocery store, I gathered the traditional ingredients. Beef sweet from the butcher counter, crystallized ginger, candied orange peel, and a bottle of brandy for aging. The sweat clerk looked puzzled when I asked for it. Most people use vegetable shortening nowadays. This is my wife's recipe. Some things shouldn't change. Back home, I mixed the dense batter in Martha's largest bowl, the blue ceramic one she'd received as a wedding gift. My hands followed her written instructions like a prayer. Fold in the flour gently. Don't over-mix. Add the brandy last. The kitchen filled with the rich scent of spices and fruit. Monday brought the steaming process. I wrapped the pudding in cheesecloth and lowered it into Martha's old steamer pot, the one she'd used every Christmas for 40 years. Steam rose like incense, carrying memories of holidays past. Christmas Eve morning, I chose my navy suit from the bedroom closet. I hadn't worn it since Martha's funeral, but the occasion seemed to demand formality. The white shirt required careful ironing, paying special attention to the collar the way Martha had taught me. The gifts went into brown paper bags, old-fashioned wrapping that reminded me of my own childhood. Red ribbon tied around each bag's handles completed the look, simple, but dignified. By 4, the pudding had cooled and sat wrapped in fresh cheesecloth on my kitchen counter. I studied myself in the hallway mirror, adjusting my tie until it sat straight. Martha would have approved of the effort. The drive to Seal's neighborhood took 20 minutes through streets lined with elaborate Christmas displays. His house sat in a development of identical colonial-style homes, each with perfectly maintained lawns and matching mailboxes. The contrast to my hand-built craftsman style was stark. I parked in the driveway behind Seal's sedan and gathered my packages from the back seat. Through the large front windows, I could see warm light spilling from inside, shadows moving around a Christmas tree. Children's laughter drifted through the glass. Standing on the front porch with gifts in my arms, I heard Madison's voice inside. "Is that Grandpa's car?" My heart lightened despite my caution. Seal opened the door with a smile broader than I'd seen in months. "Dad, right on time." He stepped aside, gesturing me into the warmth of his home. Before I could respond, Tommy and Madison burst from the living room, wrapping their arms around my waist in simultaneous hugs. "Grandpa, you came." Madison squeezed tighter, her gap-toothed grin infectious. "Of course I came, sweetheart. I brought presents." Leona appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a festive apron. "Lyman, you look wonderful. Come in, let me take your coat." Her welcome seemed genuine, warmer than our usual interactions. The house impressed me despite my reservations about modern decor. A massive Christmas tree dominated the living room corner, decorated with silver and gold ornaments that caught the light. The dining room table, visible through an archway, was set with china and crystal. "Kids, let Grandpa get settled before you attack him for presents." Seal laughed, taking my coat to a nearby closet. I handed out the wrap bags, watching their faces light up with each revelation. Tommy's eyes widened at the Lego set. "Grandpa, this is the one I wanted. How did you know?" Madison clutched her art supplies to her chest like precious treasure. "Can we use these tomorrow morning, Grandpa? I want to draw you a picture. We'll see what your parents say." The joy on their faces melted away my lingering doubts about coming here tonight. I presented the Christmas pudding to Leona, who accepted it with exaggerated gratitude. "Lyman, you shouldn't have gone to so much trouble. Martha's recipe, isn't it? The children will be thrilled." Seal led me on a brief tour of their renovated dining room, pointing out the new chair rail and built-in buffet. "We did most of the work ourselves," he said with pride I recognized from my own home projects. "Nice craftsmanship," I admitted. The workmanship was solid, if not quite to my standards. As we gathered around the table, Leona directed me to the head chair with ceremony. "This is your place tonight, Lyman, the guest of honor." The formal table setting, good china, cloth napkins, crystal glasses reminded me of holidays with Martha. Seal carved the turkey while Leona brought side dishes from the kitchen. Normal family sounds filled the room. Silverware clinking against plates. Tommy describing his science project. Madison humming Christmas carols under her breath. "Dad, I really regret that conversation we had," Seal said during the first course, his voice carrying genuine remorse. I was completely out of line. I nodded, tasting the stuffing. "Let's focus on tonight, on family." The meal progressed smoothly. Turkey carved to perfection, mashed potatoes creamy and rich, green bean casserole exactly like Martha used to make. Conversation flowed naturally between school stories, work updates, and Christmas plans. For the first time in weeks, I felt the knot in my chest beginning to loosen. This was what Christmas Eve should feel like. Family gathered together, sharing food and laughter, creating memories for the grandchildren. Seal occasionally checked his watch, but I attribute ahead it to dinner timing. Leona moved efficiently between kitchen and dining room, every dish arriving at the perfect moment. "Before we have dessert," Seal announced, rising from his chair, "I want to make a toast." He walked to the sideboard where an expensive bottle of red wine waited. "Let's drink to family with this wonderful wine." The cork popped with a satisfying sound as Cecile opened the bottle at the sideboard. "This is from that vineyard in Napa we visited last summer," he told Leona, his voice carrying forced cheer. "Can we have some too, Daddy?" Madison asked from her seat next to me. "You and Tommy can have grape juice instead," Leona replied, already rising to fetch it from the kitchen. I watched Seal pour the dark wine into 5 glasses, arranging them carefully on a silver tray. His movement seemed precise, almost rehearsed, as he positioned each glass in a specific spot on the tray. From my angle at the head of the table, I had a clear view of his actions. Seal glanced around the room, checking that everyone was occupied with dinner conversation, then reached into his jacket pocket. A small packet emerged. "White about the size of a sugar substitute." What was that, sugar? No, sugar isn't hidden like that. Seal's fingers moved quickly, tearing the packet open and dumping white powder into one specific glass. The glass positioned exactly where my place setting indicated it would go. He folded the empty packet and slipped it back into his pocket, his movements furtive and practiced. My heart began hammering against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral, continuing to cut my turkey as if I hadn't noticed anything unusual. The taste of the meal turned toast in my mouth. "Seal, help me check the pie in the oven," Leona called from the kitchen, her timing suspiciously convenient. "Of course, honey." Settle placed the tray of wine glasses on the table, carefully aligning each glass with its intended recipient. "I'll be right back, everyone." "Don't start the toast without me." They disappeared into the kitchen together, leaving me alone at the table with Tommy and Madison, who continued chattering about their Christmas morning plans. The poison wine sat 18 in from my right hand, the glass catching reflections from the chandelier overhead. My son, the boy I'd taught to hammer nails and change oil, who'd cried in my arms when he broke his bicycle, had just tried to poison me. Sterilization hit harder than any physical blow I'd ever taken. Every kind word tonight, every gesture of reconciliation, every moment of what I'd thought was genuine family warmth, all of it had been performance. A script designed to lure me here so they could what? Kill me for my inheritance. Make it look like a heart attack brought on by the stress of reconciliation. The sound of Seal and Leona returning from the kitchen snapped me back to the present moment. My hands had started trembling, but I gripped my dinner napkin to steady them. "Sorry about that," Cecile said, sliding back into his seat with that same forced smile. The pie needed a few more minutes. He reached for his wine glass, lifting it expectantly toward me. "Now, Dad, that toast to family, to new beginnings and letting go of the past." I stared at the poisoned glass, my mind racing through options. Confront him now. Pretend to drink and see what happened. Call the police? What proof did I have beyond what I'd witnessed? Cecil's smile wavered slightly as he waited for me to pick up my glass. The room fell silent, except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner and my own thundering heartbeat. Seal and Leona returned from the kitchen wearing expressions of poorly concealed relief. They settled back into their chairs as if nothing had happened, but I caught the meaningful glance they exchanged. "Now then," Cecil announced, lifting his wine glass with theatrical flourish. He distributed the glasses around the table, each one placed deliberately in front of its intended recipient. "To family and forgiveness." Tommy and Madison raised their juice cups with giggles, mimicking the adult toast. Seal's face glowed with confidence as he lifted his glass toward mine, waiting for me to follow suit. I raised my glass slowly, watching his expression with interest to getting what we deserve. We all drank together, Cecilele, taking a deep, satisfied gulp, Leona sipping nervously while watching me intently for immediate effects, the children draining their juice with enthusiasm. I took only the smallest taste, just enough to wet my lips. Seal set down his glass with a satisfied smile, checking his watch discreetly. How long had they expected their little surprise to take effect? 20 minutes? An hour? I placed my glass on the table with deliberate care and fixed my son with a steady gaze. Seal, what did you put in my glass? The color drained from his face instantly. What, nothing? I don't understand what you mean. His voice cracked on the last word, too high and too fast. The dining room fell silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Tommy and Madison looked between their parents and me with growing confusion. Leona's face had gone white as fresh snow, her hand frozen halfway to her mouth. I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. Then you won't mind that I switched our glasses while you were in the kitchen. The words hit Seal like a physical blow. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly. As comprehension dawned across his features, the confident mask crumbled, replaced by raw terror. What? The word exploded from his throat as he shot to his feet, knocking his chair backward. His hands flew to his stomach, then his mouth, as if he could somehow prevent what he'd already swallowed. What's wrong with Daddy? Madison's small voice cut through the chaos, tears starting to form in her eyes. Seal didn't answer. Head doubled over slightly, one hand braced against the table, the other pressed to his mouth. His face had taken on a greenish pallor that would have been comical under different circumstances. The bathroom, he gasped, stumbling toward the hallway. He didn't finish the sentence. The sound of his footsteps pounding down the hall was followed by the bathroom door slamming shut with enough force to rattle the pictures on the walls. Then came the retching, violent, desperate sounds that echoed through the house, punctuated by Seal's panicked gasp for air between waves of sickness. I remained seated at the head of the table, cutting another piece of turkey as if nothing unusual had occurred. The children had started crying now, clinging to each other, while their mother stood frozen in shock. Leona's eyes darted between the hallway where her husband's suffering continued, and my serene expression. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, apparently at a loss for words. Perfect. After 42 years of being Seal's father, I'd finally taught him a lesson he'd never forget. Leona approached me with trembling hands, her face streaked with tears that might have been genuine. You don't understand. We needed the money. Her voice pitched higher with each word, desperation making her careless. I set down my fork and looked at her with the same expression I'd give a stranger. You wanted to kill me for inheritance. From the bathroom came another wave of violent retching, followed by Seal's weak moaning. The sound made Madison sob harder, while Tommy tried awkwardly to comfort his little sister. It was only a sleeping drug. Leona's words tumbled out in a rush. We wanted you to change your will. Nothing permanent, just we needed you to understand how desperate we are. Lies. I stood slowly, my legs steady despite everything. You gave him enough to make him violently ill. If that was just a sleeping pill, you'd have crushed up a bottle. Leona's composure cracked completely. The mortgage payments are crushing us. The children need things we can't afford. You're sitting on hundreds of thousands while we struggle every month. Sally's anguished groans echoed from the hallway, punctuating her desperate justifications. I offered you $10,000, I reminded her coldly. Your husband called me a greedy old man and hung up on me. That's nothing compared to what you have. Leona's desperation had transformed into fury, her mask finally slipping completely. You could sell that house and live anywhere. Why should you hoard wealth while your own grandchildren go without? The children were openly sobbing now, huddled together on Tommy's chair like refugees from a war zone. They'd never seen adults behave this way, never witnessed the ugly reality behind grown-up desperation. I walked to the coat closet and retrieved my jacket, moving with careful deliberation. I'm leaving and never coming back. Wait. Leona followed me, alternating between pleading and threats. You can't just abandon them. Think about Tommy and Madison. I turned to face the children who looked up at me with tear-stained faces and confusion in their eyes. I'm sorry you had to see this. The gifts are yours to keep. Tommy wiped his nose on his sleeve. Grandpa, why is Daddy so sick? Ask your mother. I pulled on my coat, checked that I had my car keys. She has all the answers. Leona grabbed my arm as I reached for the door handle. If you leave now, we'll tell everyone what you did. We'll call the police. I looked down at her hand on my sleeve until she released it. Tell them what? That your husband tried to poison me and accidentally poisoned himself instead? That should be an interesting conversation. The bathroom had gone quiet. Either Seal had passed out or exhausted himself. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. Tell Seal he made his choice, I said, opening the front door. Actions have consequences. He's just learned that lesson the hard way. I walked to my car without looking back. Even when I heard Leona screaming my name from the doorway, the engine turned over smoothly, reliable as always, and I drove away into the cold December night. In my rearview mirror, I could see her silhouette in the doorframe, but I didn't slow down. Some bridges once burned should stay that way. Christmas morning arrived gray and quiet in my empty house. I woke to silence, made coffee in my own kitchen, and felt no regret whatsoever about the previous evening's events. Justice served cold tastes remarkably satisfying. The neighborhood showed signs of normal Christmas activity. Carson driveways, children's voices carrying across yards, the comfortable chaos of families opening presents. I watched from my front window, content with my solitude, Martha's memory keeping me company. 3 days later, Mrs. Patterson leaned over our shared fence while I was checking my mailbox. "Lyman, did you hear? Seal's been in the hospital since Christmas Eve. Something terrible with his stomach." I arranged my features into appropriate concern. "How awful. Is he recovering?" "Poor Leona's been there every day with the children. The doctors aren't sure what caused it. Some kind of severe food poisoning or reaction." She shook her head sympathetically. "You know how these things can happen during the holidays. Rich food. Too much excitement." "Indeed. Please give her my regards when you see her." Mrs. Patterson studied my face carefully, perhaps hoping for more dramatic reaction to news about my son. "Will you be visiting him at the hospital? I'm sure he's in good hands with the medical staff." That evening, E sat in Martha's favorite chair and considered Cecile's situation. The boy had gotten a taste of his own medicine, quite literally. Whatever he'd planned to give me had obviously been stronger than Leona claimed. Sleeping pills didn't typically require hospitalization. By December 30th, I'd made my decision. The phone call to my lawyer was brief and professional. The law office smelled of leather and old books exactly as it should. Mr. Hriss had handled Martha's estate and knew me as a careful, practical man who didn't make impulsive decisions. "Are you certain about this decision, Mr. Sims?" He reviewed the new will documents with practiced eyes. "This represents a significant change from your previous arrangements. Someone who tries to poison his own father doesn't deserve inheritance," I stated flatly. "The house and my savings will go to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. The grandchildren will receive trust funds when they turn 25, enough for college and a start in life, but not enough to make them lazy." Mr. Hendricks nodded slowly. "And your son and daughter-in-law received nothing." "Nothing. They've shown their true nature." The signing ceremony was simple but satisfying. My signature across the bottom of each page felt like drawing a line under an unfortunate chapter of my life. 2 witnesses from the office signed after me, making the document legally binding. January that brought a crisp, clear morning. I returned home from the lawyer's office with a copy of my new will, which I placed in the wall, safe where the old one had lived. The thick envelope fit perfectly in the space Martha's jewelry box had once occupied. Looking around my living room, I felt profound satisfaction. The house truly belonged to me now, not as something waiting to be inherited, but as my sanctuary until the day I died. Seal had taught me an invaluable lesson about family loyalty, though probably not the one he'd intended. Martha's photograph smiled at me from the mantel. I raised my coffee cup in a small salute. "You would approve, dear. I protected what we built together." If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.